Hi everyone, Danny here, and welcome to Spinelli Speaks, and another chapter summary of Edward Rutherfurd's Sarum. Now, if you have just come upon this channel and you're wondering what is happening, I am doing weekly chapter summaries of this epic saga, Edward Rutherfurd's Sarum. So if you're interested, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you can see every chapter that I produce. Again, I do these every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Central Time if you're watching this in real time. If you're watching it in playback, you can go ahead and head to the description where I have a full playlist of all of the chapters that I've already completed, as well as another book of Edward Rutherfurd's called London. I did a whole series on that book as well, so feel free to jump over there. For those of you who have been here and you are ready for the next chapter, let's go ahead and jump on in. This week, we are talking about Chapter 2, The Barrow, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was very succinct in the historical events it was describing. I thought the characters were thoughtful, and I really enjoyed that it was only 28 pages. So we're back at the place where the five rivers meet, where we know from the last chapter, Will and his family traveled from the north down to the south to find what we are calling Sarum, the Salisbury area of England. And he has created his home there with his family and is a hunter. Now, in this chapter, we do see that this area still has hunters. But the chapter does a really great job of letting you know some additional historical information, mostly referring to the innovation of farming. We know that farming came about the year somewhere before 5000 BC in the Middle East, and it trickled its way through Europe, but didn't quite touch Britain. So that's where we're going to find ourselves in this chapter. As far as time goes, we are seeing people in this area in 4000 BC. So still a very, very, very long time ago, and still the time of the hunter, as I mentioned before. But now in this chapter, we see a group of settlers come from over the sea. They came in boats and they brought their own livestock. They brought seeds, pots, and different kind of traditions than we currently had seen with our hunters. So we have this intermingling of peoples. So we had that hunter grouping of people who worship the moon goddess. And now we're seeing this group of settlers come in, and they have a medicine man, and they worship the sun god. As we start to meet some of the people, we see a hunter named Taku, who is a descendant of that Tep heritage. So that is the family line that has the longer toes. So we see that again with this Taku, and he is a hunter, and he is a little bit devious in the beginning of the chapter, but he does have a redemption arc. So he isn't as skeezy as our Tep character, but he's definitely an idiot. That's what I wrote down. He's an idiot. But anyways, going forward into some other characters, we meet Magri, who is also in the hunting clan, and he's an elder, is kind of what he's referred to. And he is a part of the Will line. So we know right away we liked Will, so of course this Magri has to be liked too, right? And he is very well liked. He is the elder, he is wise, and he helps later in the chapter, which we'll get to. The other character who is new to us, who will bring a new family line to our family tree, is Krona. And he is the leader of these settlers. And they really have a very tragic story, these settlers. Where they were living previously, where they were farming and just living their lives, there were marauders who would just pillage. And his whole family was killed, his wife, and I believe it was mentioned, it was like 4 children. So the farmers that he has with him become kind of a warring clan, so to speak. And they know how to fight and they know how to protect themselves and protect what is theirs. And they decide that the place that they are living, they don't feel like it is a safe place, and they want to go somewhere where they can feel a little bit more at ease and be able to live their lives. So that's why they make the journey across the sea, and they find the valley here that is, as we know, Sarum. Now they meet these hunters and they kind of speak to one another. They present gifts to the hunters and they said, we just want to farm the valley. We don't want to hunt on your land. Like we want to be able to settle here, and we don't need to hunt. We have our own stuff. And we see this kind of coexistence among the hunters and the settlers. Now, remember when I said Taku was an idiot? Well, he is, because he ends up like trying to hunt for a deer, and the deer gets away, and then he sees like calves in a pen, and he's like, oh, I'll take one of these. So he does, and he makes people really mad. So much so that they decide that they should kill him. But Krona, being a wise and, just really great leader, he goes, no, let's just cut his toes because they're way too long. So Taku kind of gets a little bit of a punishment that scars him for life. It's harder for him to walk, and so he's kind of like this little, like, I don't know. He reminds they're like golems, like from Lord of the Rings. Like that's what I always picture when I see this Tep line. And it's only been 2 chapters, but when they're describing him hobbling around because his toes were cut, I just imagining Gollum. Oh my goodness. Okay, moving on. So we have these 2 peoples that are trying to coexist, and they're doing okay. They're doing okay. But as you can imagine, 2 peoples who live very closely together, who have different beliefs and have different ways of lives, there's going to be some kind of clash at some point. And we see that with these hunters and settlers. And it comes in the form of a very unfortunate situation caused by our medicine man, who, if you remember, I mentioned him before, and I mentioned that the settlers worship the sun god. So in the story, there are like 2 years of just terrible rains that cause the harvest not to come to harvest. And of course, everyone blames their worship of the sun god, because that's what everything revolves around. If you're good, the sun god protects. If you're bad, he does not. And the medicine man is a huge fanatic. He is a complete nut job. A person comes to the area, and he immediately blames this person because they are of the hunters and they worship the moon goddess, and oh, it's their fault, and this, that, and the other thing. And there's a huge upheaval. There is death, there is mayhem, there's all the things that you can imagine bad happening because of this maniacal, just self-serving medicine man. And he, like I said, causes a death and causes kind of a upheaval, and mutiny seems like a harsh word, but like Krona has to step in, and he again is very wise. He doesn't immediately go for like off with his head. He really does think about it, and he thinks about the repercussions of certain things. And in this case, what's done is done. And I like to think about the Gandhi quote of an eye for an eye makes the whole world go blind. And that's really, I feel like, what Krona was kind of going after in this same situation. because he's like, no, we can't just go around killing everybody because that's just not the way to do this. So he doesn't kill the medicine man, but he keeps a very, very close eye on him. And obviously he's like, we have to prepare because now these hunters are gonna come. They're gonna try to come at us because of what happened. And of course that's happens. And because the settlers are, used to fighting, they can protect themselves. So it's kind of it's not well balanced. And finally, Magri, like I mentioned before, who is of the hunters, he comes to speak with Krona. And it really starts off or sets off the course of these people moving forward, and how that they're going to continue to progress in the timeline, as far as being, no longer separated. So you have the work of two really wise men who decide, like, instead of being separate, instead of working against each other, we need to work together to move forward, because our way of life is slowly dying out, this hunter way of life, because they can see, like, these settlers, they've been here for a couple of years, they've really prospered, they have buildings now, they have more animals now, their harvest can get them through their winter, like, so there's a lot to be said about the innovation of farming, right? So these two very wise leaders put their heads together and decide to become one, and they decide that Krona should be the leader of both groups as one. So I don't like to leave a chapter without talking about the role of women, and there wasn't too much in this chapter to specifically speak on. There's not much mention of women other than one was killed, one is a wife, so you get her name. There are other wives, but we don't get any of their names, and we don't really hear about them at all. It's really about these main men that I mentioned. However, when Magri comes and says, we need to be one people and you should be the leader, he goes, oh, here are two girls that in the book, Krona literally thinks in his head, he can see that they must have just reached puberty. So they're girls. They're probably like 12 years old. Have these. Literally, that's what they're said. Have these. Just pieces of property. Here's our gift to you to show you that we want to be one. And I know that some of your men need wives, so have these. So anyway, we haven't moved much in the last 4,000 years, or it's been 3,500 years since the last chapter. We haven't moved much, I would say, at all. In the status of women. So, but like I said, there wasn't really a lot. That was noteworthy to me because it was like, have these. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyways, I'm going to highlight that one. So to summarize, I feel like in thinking back to what I discussed, I may have been a little bit of convoluted in what I was describing. But to summarize, we have the land is still being hunted. We still have the era of the hunter, but we have these settlers come and occupy the valley and create a completely new way of life, that Neolithic farmer that we learn in history. So we're going to see historically in archaeology, the pots, the tools, the way the way in which they did farming. So, how they plowed and the tools that we see in the land as we have these archaeological digs. Not getting too wrapped up in history. Anyways, and we see that we have this introduction of trade. So towards the end of the chapter, they're noticing that their wool on their sheep is getting a little dull. So they know, as good farmers, they know they need to introduce a new sheep and breed in a new sheep to make that wool better. So they know they have to cross the sea again to bring back a new strain of sheep, and Taku kind of leads that up. So like I said, there was that redemption arc. And so we see that introduction of trade. So they trade pelts and stuff that the hunters can provide to back to the mainland, where they don't see a lot of that. So we have that trade system in place. And then we see that clash of religion. So the moon goddess and the sun god. And I wouldn't say that like one was stamped out and that was in contention when they were deciding to mesh the two groups, but it was kind of known like they're still going to worship this moon goddess, but they know like as a whole we worship the sun god. So it was kind of like overlooked and like we're not going to worry about this because it's not that big of a deal. And then we just have that, you know, little bit of the role or status of women just being the same property. They're just property for breeding, pretty much, and making pots and shearing, you know, work like slaves, basically. And at the very end of the chapter, we get the reason for the title. So the Barrow, right? So at Crona's death, the people and the person who's going to be the leader, his name is Gwillick, and he is married to one of the, you know, girls that have these. So he has a good melding of like hunter and settler mentality. So he is going to be the next leader. He decides that we need a special burial because Crona was such a wise and amazing leader that we can't just, we need something more. So they make these barrows, which are basically tombs. They're above ground. So they kind of make somewhat of a house with sticks and stones. And then they mound over that with dirt and earth. And it basically becomes part of the land. But there's these little mounds that you can still see today. And that is and became tradition for men of great importance, families of great importance. And so you will see these mounds, these barrows across the English countryside. And they're literally just old ceremonial burial tombs. Which is fascinating. I found it very fascinating, and I was a little bit saddened that it wasn't a bigger part of the chapter, because obviously when you name something, when you name a chapter, in your head you're thinking that's the most important part of this chapter. And really it wasn't. It was kind of an afterthought, because it was only like 2.5 pages worth of the chapter. But I found it the most fascinating. It really is quite fascinating. I'd be interested to learning more of that in the nonfiction world, to see just like what exactly, how many are there and where they all are and what they look like today. But yeah, so very interesting chapter. Like I said, it was only 28 pages, which was fantastic, let me tell you. And like I said, I quite liked it. So I hope you liked it as well. I hope that you are getting through the chapters okay. I'm pretty sure the next chapter is a long one. So good luck with that. I will see you with that chapter next week, Sunday at 6 p.m. And we'll see what happens. Until then, I hope you are reading this fantastic tome or maybe something equally fantastic. I hope you're taking care, staying safe, and as always, you know how it goes. Happy reading. Bye.